Okay, chapter 6. If you notice, it's on pink paper because pink's my favorite color and chapter 6 my favorite chapter. This chapter is huge, 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 huge for your future. So, um, we will take it slow and I will make sure you know every step along the way. Chapter 6.1 is solving one-step addition and subtraction equations. And what I have happen a lot in this chapter is students know how to do these problems, like the next few sections. They know how to do in their head. So we might be looking at a problem like this, 3x equals 15. A lot of you can, in your head, know what x is. But I don't care what the answer is. And you might have already worked through all of 6.1 and said, I know the answers to all of these. And you may have answered all of them, but I don't care what the answer is. What I care about is that you know how to get x by itself, and how to get what x is. Not memorize what it is, but how to get there. Eventually, you will be working with problems that look like this. And you're going to need to know to solve this, you're going to need to know all the steps that I'm going to teach you in this chapter. And if you don't know how to do this basic problem, you're not going to be able to do this more complicated problem when we get there. So even if you know how to find the answer, that's awesome. But then step back and listen to me on how to get there. The number one rule of solving equations is what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So I know when I was a student, I didn't really pay attention to these rules, the subtraction property of equality and the addition property of equality. Subtraction property of equality says that you can subtract one thing from one side, but you must do it to the other. So if you look, we have A minus C, so you have to subtract C from B as well. And the addition property of equality is the exact opposite. If you add C to both sides, to one side, you have to add C to both sides. So the subtraction property of equality and addition property of equality are basically this number one rule of what you do to one side, you must do to the other. Okay, let's review. What does the additive inverse mean? The additive inverse means that if I have negative 2, I can add a positive 2 and get 0. So I'm canceling out. If I have positive 5, I can add a negative 5 and get 0. So I'm canceling it out. If I have negative 4, I can add a positive 4 and get 0. And I'm canceling out. So that is what the additive inverse is. X plus 6 equals 4. Here I'm going to use the additive inverse to get x by itself. That's my whole goal when I'm in chapter 6, always I guess in chapter 6. My whole goal is to get x by itself. So this equal sign separates the equation into two parts. If you think back to the balance that we used in class, the balance is like two different sides of the balance. So this is like one side of the balance. I'm not a very good artist. And this is the other side of the balance. So what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So I'm going to do the additive inverse of 6. So to get 6 to become 0, I add a negative 6. And I added a negative 6 to the left side, so that means I have to also do it to the right side. Because what you do to one side, you must do to the other. Positive 6 plus negative 6 cancels out. It's 0. So we don't even write it. It's 0. So we bring down, the only thing we have left over here is x equals 4 plus negative 6 is negative 2. So I circle it, and that's my answer. Now, a lot of you could have probably done this in your head. This step, and knowing how to show this step, is huge, 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 huge. Now, on a test, you're not going to have very many problems that are this basic. The majority of your problems are going to be longer and require multiple steps. So you're learning how to do the easier stuff so that you can do the harder stuff. Okay, I have 14 plus y equals 20. So again, I draw that line to show the two sides of the balance. I circle the y, that's what I'm trying to get by itself. And I have a positive 14 here. Right in front of 14, there's no negative sign, so that means that it's a positive 14. So the additive inverse of the positive 14 is I add negative 14. And a positive 14 plus a negative 14 is 0, so it just cancels out. And what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So I add a negative 14 to this side as well. And I bring down my y. And 20 plus negative 14 is 6. So I circle it. And that's my answer. Negative 5 equals b plus 8. So I'm going to draw my line. It's going to show the two sides of my equation. I'm going to circle my b. That's what I'm trying to get by itself, the variable. So I have a positive 8, so I'm going to do the additive inverse to get 0. So I'm going to add a negative 8. And what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So we add a negative 8 to the other side. And we have negative 5 plus negative 8, which is negative 13. And these cancel out. And I'm left with b. Now, I always, for some reason, I'm just a math nerd, and I always have to write my variable first, so I would rewrite it as b equals negative 13. This is okay, but when we get to inequalities, you'll get used to writing your variable always on the left side, so you might want to get in the habit now, but you don't have to. If you feel like you are getting this, I would hit pause and I would try this one on my own, and then I'd come back and watch me do it. So that's what my suggestion for taking this or watching this video is. So I'm going to draw my line, and I have negative 12 on one side and then 4 plus c on the other. I'm going to circle my variable of c, so I'm trying to get by itself. I have a positive 4, so to get c by itself, I'm going to add a negative 4, and what you do to one side, you must do to the other, so I'm going to add a negative 4 over here as well. Okay, so I have negative 12 plus negative 4, which is negative 16, equals 4 plus negative 4 cancels out to be 0. So I'm left with a c on the other side. Again, I'm going to rewrite it c equals negative 16. You would not have to necessarily do the same. We're going to circle it, and that's my answer. Okay, word problems. An angelfish can grow to be 12 inches long. If an angelfish is 8.5 inches longer than a clownfish, how long is a clownfish? Now, I run into the same problems here as I do up above. I have students that want to do this in their head and don't want to write out an equation, which I completely understand because I can do it in my head and it would be way easier that way. But we have to learn how to write an equation with the more basic problems so that when we get to the harder problems, we know how to solve them. So what they want us to do is they want us to say X represents clownfish. And clownfish is 8.5 inches longer. Or angelfish is 8.5 inches longer than a clownfish. And we know that an angelfish is 12 inches longer. So we do X plus 8.5 equals 12. Okay, so my problem is set up. I circle my X because that's what I'm trying to get by itself. I draw my line to show the other side of the equation, and then I add the additive inverse of 8.5, which would be a negative 8.5. And what I do to one side, I must do to the other, so I add a negative 8.5 over here as well. And then I have x, because these cancel out, equals 12 plus negative 8.5 is 3.5. And I circle it, and I'm going to throw on a label of inches. And that's my answer. A grapefruit weighs 11 ounces, which is 6 ounces more than an apple. Write and solve an equation to find the weight of the apple. So again, I have to set up an equation. So I'm going to do A for apple plus 6. That's going to equal my grapefruit, which is 11 ounces. Then I'm going to draw my line, circle my variable, add the additive inverse. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. 6 plus negative 6 is 0, so I'm left with A equals 11 plus negative 6 is 5 ounces. Okay, now we have subtraction. So we have x minus 2 equals 1. So I add the opposite, and I have x plus negative 2 equals 1. What would I add to get, well, first I need to draw my line and circle my variable. Then I ask myself, what would I add to get negative 2 to become 0? I would add its additive inverse. So I would add a positive 2. And what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So you add 2 to both sides. These cancel out, and I'm left with x equals 1 plus 2 is 3. So I circle it, and that's my answer. 12 equals z minus 8. So I'm going to add the opposite and have 12 equals z plus negative 8. Then I'm going to draw my line, circle my variable, and the thing that's stopping z, or my variable, from being by itself is negative 8. So I add a positive 8, and what you do to one side, you must do to the other. 12 plus 8 is 20. These cancel out, and I'm left with a z. Again, I always like to have my variable on the left side, so I'm going to write z equals 20. And I'm going to circle it, and that's my answer. A pair of shoes costs $25. This is 14 less than the cost of a pair of jeans. Find the cost of the jeans. So we have jeans. We don't know how much the jeans cost, so we're going to use J. And we know that shoes are 14 less than the jeans, and the shoes are $25. So we add the opposite, so this becomes a negative 14. We draw our line, we circle our variable, and we ask ourselves, what's the additive inverse of negative 14? It is a positive 14, so I add 14 to both sides, because what you do to one side, you must do to the other. Cancel these out, and I'm left with J equals 25 plus 14 is 39. So the jeans cost $39. Okay, for our last problem, they throw in a little geometry. So these lines on this triangle are to remind you that this side is equal to this side. So we could set that up as 6 plus a is equal to 11. We draw our line to separate, we circle our variable, and to get rid of the 6, we add the opposite, so we do plus a negative 6, and what you do to one side, you must do to the other, so we add negative 6 to both sides, cancels out, and we're left with a equals 11 plus negative 6 is 5. So if a equals 5.